Boca del Rio, Veracruz, the 20th of September, 2011. 35 mutilated bodies of members of the Sinaloa Cartel lie abandoned in broad daylight under a bridge. This massacre marks the beginning of the bloodiest war in the history of Mexican drug trafficking, CJNG versus Sinaloa Cartel. From the kidnapping of Chapo's sons to massacres that left dozens of dismembered bodies, this battle has redefined the limits of what power and money can achieve in the wrong hands. How did these criminal titans reach this point of no return? In the arid mountains of Sinaloa, a seed of ambition sprouted, transforming a modest marijuana crop into a criminal empire that would shake the entire world. How could a handful of farmers become Mexico's most feared drug lords? The story begins in the 1960s with Pedro Aviles Perez, the pioneer of modern Mexican drug trafficking. Aviles, a farmer with entrepreneurial vision, organized local farmers into an unprecedented marijuana production and distribution network. His most audacious innovation was to introduce the use of aeroplanes for smuggling, circumventing traditional border controls and dramatically expanding the scope of his operations. Aviles' success attracted ambitious followers such as Miguel Angel Felix Gallardo, Rafael Caro Quintero, and Ernesto Fonseca Carrillo. These men not only inherited their mentor's knowledge, but also his unbridled ambition. The era of Aviles came to an abrupt end in 1978, when police bullets silenced the pioneer forever. But fate had in store a twist that would forever change the face of drug trafficking in Mexico. One night in 1978, in a bar in Culiacan, Felix Gallardo met a Colombian pilot who told him about a new drug that was taking the streets of Miami by storm: cocaine. This chance conversation would be the spark that would ignite a devastating fire. Felix Gallardo, seeing further ahead of his rivals, realized that the future lay in cocaine. With cunning and determination, he began to weave a web of connections that would stretch from the jungles of Colombia to the streets of Los Angeles. Aviles' modest empire was about to transform into a multinational criminal corporation. In the 1980s, Felix Gallardo founded the Guadalajara Cartel, the first large-scale drug trafficking organization in Mexico. His dominance seemed absolute, but the fall was to come unexpectedly. In 1985, the murder of DEA agent Enrique Camarena sparked an international manhunt that culminated in Felix Gallardo's capture in 1989. The fall of the boss of bosses led to the fragmentation of his empire. New cartels emerged from his ashes, among them the Sinaloa Cartel, led by Joaquin El Chapo Guzmán. El Chapo revolutionized the business with an independent cell structure and a franchise system that made detection difficult. He innovated trafficking with cross-border tunnels, semi-submersible submarines, and ultralight aircraft. Meanwhile, the map of drug trafficking in Mexico was being reconfigured. The Golden Triangle of Sinaloa, Durango, and Chihuahua became the epicenter of drug production. Trafficking routes stretched from the Pacific ports to the northern border, infiltrating every corner of the country. The narco economy grew exponentially, infiltrating legitimate businesses and corrupting the fabric of society. From local police to high-level officials, corruption became systemic. Drug trafficking was no longer just a criminal business, but a force shaping Mexico's politics and economy. On this deadly chessboard, new players were emerging. The Arellano Felix brothers in Tijuana, the Carrillo Fuentes in Juarez, and the Gulf Cartel in the Northeast. Each was fighting for its piece of the pie, unleashing unprecedented violence. The United States, the main market for these drugs, played an ambiguous role. On the one hand, its insatiable demand fueled the business. On the other, its agencies carried out covert operations to dismantle the cartels, often with unexpected consequences. By the dawn of the new millennium, drug trafficking in Mexico had evolved from a small smuggling operation into a multinational juggernaut that challenged the state. But while the drug trafficking world remained focused on the exploits of the Sinaloa Cartel, few were paying attention to a low-profile ex-cop who was about to shake the foundations of organized crime in Mexico, from a former avocado salesman to the leader of the country's most violent and technologically advanced cartel. The story of the Jalisco Cartel, New Generation, CJNG, begins with the fall of the Milenio Cartel. In 2009, the capture of Oscar Orlando Nava Valencia, El Lobo, leader of the Milenio Cartel, triggered a series of events that would change Mexico's criminal landscape forever. From the ashes of the Milenio Cartel, two factions emerged: the Resistance and the Proto-CJNG. But one man would stand out among them all: Nemesio Oseguera Cervantes, El Mencho. His story seemed straight out of a novel: former Jalisco policeman, deported from the United States, and avocado seller. How did this seemingly ordinary man become the leader of Mexico's most violent cartel? The rise of El Mencho coincided with the expansion of Los Chapitos, the armed wing of the Gulf Cartel that spread terror in Veracruz. In response, a group was formed, paramilitary group known as Los Zetas. Recruiting former military and police, this group adopted psychological warfare tactics that terrorized even the feared Zetas. Surprisingly, the Zetas found an unexpected ally: the Sinaloa Cartel. Ignacio Nacho, Colonel Chapo Guzmán's lieutenant, saw in this group an opportunity to expand his influence. He provided them with routes, contacts, and production methods, but fate had other plans. In 2010, a military operation took the life of Nacho Coronel. This event, which seemed like a blow to drug trafficking, would become the catalyst El Mencho needed. With the power vacuum in Guadalajara, the CJNG emerged from the shadows, ready to reclaim its place. Tension escalated rapidly. In March 2011, Martin Beltran Coronel, Nacho Coronel's nephew, was murdered in Guadalajara. This was not a simple settling of scores. It was a declaration of war. The CJNG was ready to eliminate any trace of Sinaloa's influence in its new territory. Accusations flew back and forth. The CJNG accused the Sinaloa Cartel of handing over information to the authorities, betraying the code of silence that had governed the drug trafficking underworld for decades. Sinaloa, for its part, accused the CJNG of breaking the unspoken agreements that maintained a fragile peace between the cartels. The breakup of the Federation, the informal alliance between the main Mexican cartels, was the final blow to any hope of stability in the drug trafficking world. Now it was every cartel for itself in a struggle for survival and dominance. The CJNG innovated in their tactics. They pioneered the use of social media to spread their propaganda, aggressively recruited former military and police officers, and adopted a hierarchical structure with military discipline. Their expansion was meteoric, taking control of Veracruz and making inroads into Michoacán and Guanajuato. The Sinaloa Cartel, used to reigning unchallenged, was forced to respond. But its strategy of local alliances appeared weak in the face of the CJNG's brute force. By the end of 2011, the CJNG had established itself as a criminal power. Proof of this was on the 20th of September 2011, in broad daylight, two vans were abandoned under an overpass on Boulevard Avila Camacho, one of the busiest avenues in Boca del Rio, Veracruz. From them were strewn 35 lifeless bodies, some half-naked and with visible signs of torture. The scene, horrifying in itself, was accompanied by a message written on a banner that directly challenged Joaquin El Chapo Guzmán and his allies. The text not only claimed responsibility for the massacre, but also warned that this was the fate that awaited all those who supported the Sinaloa Cartel in Veracruz. The signature at the end of the narco manta, Grupo Matazetas, the armed wing of the CJNG. This massacre marked the point of no return. The war between the CJNG and the Sinaloa Cartel had been openly declared. The international community reacted with horror, increasing pressure on the Mexican government to act. But the spiral of violence was far from over. Just a few months later, Mexico would witness another unprecedented act of brutality. Between 12 and the 13th of May 2012, it was rocked by one of the most brutal episodes in the cartel war. On Federal Highway 40, near Cadereyta Ximenez, Nuevo León, 49 mutilated and decapitated human torsos were found. The victims, possibly members of the Gulf Cartel or migrants, had been murdered and dismembered. The subsequent investigation led to the arrest of Jesus Daniel Elizondo Ramirez, alias El Loco, an important leader of Los Zetas. It was revealed that the massacre had been ordered by the cartel's top leaders, Heriberto Lazcano and Miguel Trevino Morales, with the aim of causing confusion among the population and the authorities. The media, both national and international, could not ignore the escalating violence. Images of dismembered bodies and cities under siege by drug traffickers flooded television screens and the front pages of newspapers. The Mexican government, under intense international pressure, was forced to respond. But its actions seemed ineffective in the face of the scale of the conflict. Military operations, arrests of minor capos, grandiloquent declarations, nothing seemed to stem the tide of bloodshed flooding the country. As the public watched in horror, one question hung in the air. What secret strategies would these cartels adopt to gain the upper hand in this all-out war? The answer was not long in coming, and it would be more terrifying than anyone could have imagined. The CJNG, under the leadership of El Mencho, opted for an aggressive and ruthless expansion strategy. Extreme violence became its hallmark. Beheadings, bodies hanging from bridges, and public massacres became common in the territories they disputed. This brutality served a dual purpose: to terrorize their enemies and to attract new recruits seduced by the image of absolute power. But the CJNG did not just rely on brute force. They created Los Quines, led by Abigail Gonzalez Valencia, brother-in-law of El Mencho, who became the financial brains behind the meteoric rise of the CJNG. This group, composed of financial and money laundering experts, transformed the cartel into a sophisticated transnational criminal corporation. The Sinaloa Cartel, for its part, responded by strengthening its local alliances and deepening its network of institutional corruption. Its strategy was based on intelligence and infiltration, preferring bribery to bullets whenever possible. The arms race between the cartels reached unprecedented levels. The CJNG shocked the world with the use of explosive drones and handcrafted armored vehicles, the infamous monsters. Sinaloa, not willing to be left behind, perfected their cross-border tunnels and developed a fleet of semi-submersible submarines for maritime trafficking. The organizational structures of both cartels reflected their operational philosophies. The CJNG adopted a strict quasi-military hierarchy with paramilitary training for its members. Hitmen. Sinaloa, on the other hand, maintained a system of semi-autonomous cells, offering greater flexibility and resistance to blows from the authorities. The bloodiest clashes took place in key drug trafficking territories. The ports of Lázaro Cárdenas, Manzanillo, and Veracruz became battlegrounds, as did the border cities of Tijuana and Juarez. Control of these strategic points meant control of the most lucrative trafficking routes. In the midst of this chaos, satellite groups and smaller cartels constantly shifted alliances, adding an element of unpredictability to the conflict. But an unexpected blow shook the drug trafficking chessboard on the 22nd of February 2014, the capture of Joaquin El Chapo Guzmán. The fall of the Sinaloa Cartel's most emblematic leader seemed to mark a turning point in the war. However, the organization proved resilient, maintaining its operations almost without interruption. But as the cartels fought each other, a new threat was on the horizon, one that would change the rules of the game forever: fentanyl. This synthetic drug, 50 times more potent than heroin, began flooding the North American market. Originating in laboratories in China, fentanyl promised astronomical profits with minimal logistics. Soon, both cartels were engaged in a frantic race to dominate its production and distribution. Clandestine laboratories were set up across Mexico, while new routes and methods of concealment were developed in ever more ingenious ways. Innovation also came to drug dealing, with the use of the darknet and cryptocurrencies for anonymous transactions and home delivery systems that rivaled legitimate courier services. Overwhelmed, the authorities tried to respond with operations against the laboratories and international cooperation efforts to trace precursor chemicals. But it seemed a losing battle. The impact of fentanyl was devastating. In the United States, the opioid crisis reached epidemic proportions, with thousands of overdose deaths each year. The cartels were now fighting a new battle for the cooks and skilled chemists capable of producing the drug. A significant blow occurred in 2015 when Mexican authorities, in cooperation with the DEA, succeeded in dismantling a key CJNG laboratory. This momentary success seemed to tip the balance in the fentanyl war. However, the consequences were unexpected. There was an increase in overdoses due to inconsistency in the purity of the drug on the streets. While the cartels celebrated their record profits, the human cost of the war between these two cartels between 2011 and 2015 was devastating. Homicide rates soared, reaching almost 27,000 by 2015. Entire towns became ghost towns due to forced displacement, with more than 280,000 people fleeing the violence. In response, self-defense groups emerged, especially in Michoacán, as the local economy and tourism collapsed. Psychological trauma spread, normalizing violence in everyday life. However, civil society responded with peace movements, such as the one led by Javier Cecilia. The media struggled between censorship and sensationalism, making Mexico one of the most dangerous countries for journalism. His message challenged both the cartels and the government, arguing that the militarization of the conflict cost too many innocent lives. It advocated a focus on social justice and the reduction of poverty and corruption. Cecilia's movement managed to put the crisis at the center of national and international debate, successfully pushing for the passage of the General Victims Law in 2013. At the end of 2015, a crucial question arose. How would this conflict evolve? The answer to this question was not long in coming, and it came in dramatic fashion. On 15 August 2016, the conflict between the Sinaloa Cartel and the CJNG escalated to unprecedented levels. That night, at the luxurious La Leche restaurant in Puerto Vallarta, Jalisco, CJNG hitmen carried out a daring operation: the kidnapping of Ivan Arquivaldo and Jesus Alfredo Guzmán Salazar, two of Joaquin El Chapo Guzmán's sons. The incident, which lasted just 3 minutes and 11 seconds, occurred during Ivan Arquivaldo's birthday celebration. What was initially planned as an assassination turned into a complex negotiation that tested the power and influence of both cartels. From his cell in El Altiplano, El Chapo had to turn to his associate El Mayo Zambada to negotiate with El Mencho. Although the exact details of the deal are still the subject of speculation, it is believed that the Sinaloa Cartel handed over $1 million sum and a significant amount of drugs for the release of Los Chapitos. Other versions suggest that the negotiation involved the life of El Mencho's son, Ruben Oseguera Gonzalez, who was incarcerated at the time. This bold move by the CJNG not only demonstrated its growing power and reach, but also marked a turning point in the cartel war. The message was clear: no one was untouchable in this new era of Mexican drug trafficking. The incident exacerbated existing tensions and took the rivalry between the CJNG and the Sinaloa Cartel to a new level of violence and direct confrontation. The war between the CJNG and the Sinaloa Cartel went beyond Mexico's borders, becoming a global conflict. Between 2015 and 2017, both cartels intensified their struggle to dominate the lucrative US market. The CJNG, with its militarized structure, established cells in key cities such as Chicago and Los Angeles, while Sinaloa strengthened its historic presence on the southwest border. Simultaneously, the cartels expanded their operations in South America. They established new routes through countries such as Ecuador and Argentina, forging alliances with local criminals. This expansion not only increased the flow of drugs, but also diversified their sources of income. However, a shocking revelation was yet to come. Investigations by international agencies uncovered links between Mexican cartels and terrorist groups in the Middle East. How had this unlikely alliance been forged? The answer came in 2017, when it was revealed that cartels were using smuggling networks set up by extremist groups to move drugs and weapons through Africa and Europe. This unexpected collaboration demonstrated the sophistication and global reach of Mexican criminal organizations. Money laundering reached unprecedented levels. Cartels infiltrated the art market, using high-profile auctions to clean millions. Simultaneously, they dived into the world of cryptocurrencies, taking advantage of their anonymity to move funds internationally. The climax came with the collapse of an international bank in 2018. Investigations revealed a vast network of accounts and transactions linked to Mexican cartels, exposing the extent of their infiltration of the global financial system. The international response was swift. The United States and Mexico launched unprecedented joint operations, while other countries tightened their anti-money laundering laws. High-profile extraditions followed, including that of Joaquin El Chapo Guzmán to the United States in 2017. As the international community closed ranks against the cartels, one question persisted: what new technology could be a game changer in the global battle against drug trafficking? As the war between cartels entered a new decade, technology became the new battleground. In 2019, both the CJNG and the Sinaloa Cartel began using artificial intelligence to predict policing patterns and optimize their trafficking routes. Drones, once used primarily for reconnaissance, were transformed into lethal weapons capable of carrying out targeted assassinations with surgical precision. Cyber warfare reached new heights. In 2020, a massive hacking attack attributed to the CJNG almost succeeded in dismantling the Sinaloa Cartel's communications network. This incident demonstrated how vulnerable even the most powerful criminal organizations were to digital threats. Facing increasing pressure on traditional drug trafficking, both cartels aggressively diversified their operations. Human trafficking intensified, with networks extending from Central America to the United States and Europe. arms trafficking flourished, taking advantage of global conflicts. Surprisingly, the cartels also. They engaged in illegal exploitation of natural resources, from logging in the Amazon to illegal mining in Africa. In parallel, the cartels infiltrated legitimate industries on an unprecedented scale. The avocado business in Michoacán fell under the control of the CJNG, while the Sinaloa Cartel expanded its influence in mining and tourism. This diversification not only provided new sources of revenue, but also effective fronts for money laundering. A persistent rumor suggested that the cartels were exploring a new illegal market, but its exact nature remained a mystery. What new criminal frontier were they about to cross? The period 2022 to 2023 saw a generational shift in cartel leadership. El Chapo's sons, known as Los Chapitos, assumed a more prominent role in the Sinaloa Cartel, bringing with them a more corporate and technologically advanced vision of drug trafficking. Meanwhile, CJNG's El Mencho promoted a new generation of lieutenants, many of them with university education and experience in international finance. This new generation of narcos is different. Raised on smartphones and cryptocurrencies, they now see drug trafficking not just as a criminal business, but as a global enterprise that requires sophisticated management skills and a deep understanding of technology and international finance. As we enter 2024, the map of narco power in Mexico has undergone dramatic changes. The Sinaloa Cartel, following the capture of several of Chapo's sons, has seen its dominance eroded in traditional strongholds such as Culiacán and Tijuana. The CJNG, meanwhile, has consolidated its control in Jalisco and expanded its influence in states such as Guanajuato and Michoacán. New alliances and betrayals have reshaped the criminal landscape. Surprisingly, factions of the Sinaloa Cartel have made pacts with former rivals to counter the CJNG's advance. Meanwhile, the emerging market that everyone feared has revealed itself: the production and distribution of synthetic designer drugs, created with artificial intelligence, that promise more potent and addictive effects than anything seen before. Looking ahead, analysts debate whether this endless war could finally come to an end. Some see an inevitable escalation, with ever more advanced technology pushing the violence to new extremes. Others envision the possibility of a negotiated peace, driven by public fatigue and international pressure. The political factor adds another layer of uncertainty. The 2024 presidential elections in Mexico and the United States could radically change counter-narcotic strategies on both sides of the border. The question on everyone's mind: who will be the last one standing? The CJNG with its militarized structure and ruthless brutality? The Sinaloa Cartel with its experience and global connections? Or will a new player emerge that completely changes the rules of the game? The legacy of this war is deep and lasting. Mexico has paid an incalculable price in human lives, social stability, and economic development. The world has witnessed how organized crime can challenge and corrupt entire institutions. The lessons learned are bitter but clear. The war on drugs, as fought so far, has failed. The future of the fight against drugs is likely to require a radically new approach, one that addresses the root causes of drug demand and offers real alternatives to illicit cultivation and trafficking. The real question is not who will win this war, but how we, as a global society, can create a future where such wars are no longer necessary. The real winner of this war will not be any cartel, but those communities and leaders who manage to build viable alternatives to drug trafficking, transforming local economies and offering hope where before there was only violence and despair.